You told my husband I was having an affair in front of your entire family, and now you're going to sit there and explain why." The dining room went silent. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Wine glasses paused in midair. For a moment, the only sound was the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner and someone's sharp intake of breath. Claire Hayes, my sister-in-law, looked up from her plate with that familiar expression, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, the picture of confused innocence. "Emma," she said softly, voice dripping with concern, "I have no idea what you're talking about." I watched her perform. That's what it was, a performance. The gentle tilt of her head, the way her hand fluttered to her chest, the slight furrow between her perfectly shaped brows. She'd perfected this routine over years of practice, and it had worked every single time. Not tonight. "Yes, you do," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. I stood up from my chair, the legs scraping against the hardwood floor. Every eye in the room turned to me. My mother-in-law, Margaret, looked alarmed. My father-in-law, James, set down his fork with careful precision. And David, my husband, stared at me with a mixture of confusion and something that looked like warning. "Don't make a scene," his eyes said. "Not here, not now." But I was done protecting other people's comfort at the expense of my own sanity. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, setting it deliberately in the center of the table between the roasted chicken and the bowl of mashed potatoes. 18 months, I said, looking around the table at each face. That's how long this has been going on. 18 months of whispered concerns and helpful observations and worried phone calls. All from her, I pointed at Claire. All about me. "Emma, please," David said quietly, reaching for my hand. "Can we talk about this later?" "No," I said, pulling my hand back. "We've been talking about it later for a year and a half. Every time I tried to tell you what was happening, you told me I was overreacting, that Claire was just looking out for you, that I was being too sensitive." My voice cracked slightly on the last word, but I pushed through. "Well, I'm done being sensitive. Tonight, everyone gets to hear the truth." Claire stood up now, her chair pushing back with theatrical precision. "I don't know what's gotten into you, Emma, but this is completely inappropriate. This is a family dinner, not—" "Exactly," I cut her off. "A family dinner. Which is why everyone in this family needs to know what you've been doing to me. To us." I looked at David. "To your brother's marriage." Margaret set down her napkin, her face pale. "Girls, I really think—" "Mom, it's fine," Claire said quickly, her voice taking on that soothing, reasonable tone. "Emma's obviously upset about something. We can talk about this privately, Emma. Whatever's bothering you, we can work it out." "Can we?" I asked. "Can we work out the fact that you told my husband I was having an affair? That you called him 3 weeks ago and told him you saw me coming out of the Marriott Hotel on 8th Street with another man?" The silence that followed was absolute. David's face drained of color. Claire's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "That's not—" she started. "I have the voicemail," I said, tapping my phone. "Would you like me to play it? Would everyone like to hear exactly what you said?" Claire's eyes darted to David, then back to me. I was concerned. I thought I saw something that— "You didn't see anything," I said, my voice rising now despite my efforts to stay calm. "Because I wasn't at any hotel. I was in a conference room with 6 colleagues, finishing our quarterly review. I have the calendar invite. I have emails time-stamped from that meeting. I have witnesses." I picked up my phone. "But you didn't care about facts, did you, Claire? You just needed to plant another seed of doubt." James cleared his throat. Claire, what is Emma talking about? Before Claire could answer, I pressed play on my phone. Her voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable through the speaker. Hey, David, it's me. Listen, I'm driving home and I didn't want to say anything, but I'm really worried. I was near 8th Street about an hour ago, and I could have sworn I saw Emma coming out of the Marriott with some guy. Maybe it was nothing, maybe it was work-related, but I don't know, it just looked strange. Don't tell her I called. I don't want to cause problems, but I think you should keep an eye on things. I just love you so much, and I don't want you to get hurt. Call me later, okay? The message ended. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I watched the realization spread across the faces around the table. Margaret's hand over her mouth, James's jaw clenching, David staring at his sister like he'd never seen her before. Claire recovered first, her voice taking on a defensive edge. I was trying to protect you, she said to David. I thought I saw something concerning, and as your sister, I felt obligated to— You lied, I said flatly. You didn't think you saw anything. You invented an entire scenario because that's what you've been doing since the day David and I got married. Planting little lies, whispering little concerns, making me sound unstable, controlling, unfaithful, anything to make him doubt me. That's ridiculous, Claire snapped, dropping the concerned act. You're being paranoid, Emma. Classic projection, honestly. If anything, this outburst proves— I talked to Jenna, I said. Claire froze mid-sentence. And Mark, I continued. You remember them, right? David's ex-girlfriends? The serious relationships he had before me? I found them on social media. We had some very interesting conversations. David's head snapped toward me. You did what? I did what I had to do, I said, looking at him, because you wouldn't. Believe me. Every time I told you your sister was sabotaging our marriage, you defended her. So I went looking for proof that I wasn't crazy. And guess what I found? I turned back to Claire. You did this to them too. Same pattern, same concerned phone calls, same helpful observations about how they weren't right for David, how they were flirting with other men, how they seemed unstable. Claire's face had gone pale, then flushed bright red. You can't— Jenna told me you convinced David she was cheating on him with a coworker, I said. She wasn't. She was planning a surprise party for his birthday with that coworker's help. But you twisted it into something ugly, didn't you? Made it sound suspicious. Planted enough doubt that when she tried to explain, David didn't believe her. I looked at my husband, saw the recognition dawning on his face as he remembered. And Mark, I continued, turning back to Claire, you told David that Mark's family didn't like him, that they thought he was too controlling. That was a lie, too. Mark's mother loved David. She was heartbroken when they broke up. But you couldn't stand that David was building a life that didn't revolve around you, could you? Stop it, Claire said, her voice shaking. You don't know what you're talking about. I've always supported David's relationships. I've always been there for him. You've always been threatened by him having anyone else in his life, I shot back. Any woman who might become more important to him than you. So you destroy them, one by one, with your helpful concerns and your protective instincts. You wrap your manipulation in love and call it loyalty. Tom, Claire's husband, who'd been silent this entire time, made a small sound in his throat. Claire's head whipped toward him, eyes flashing with something close to panic. Don't, she warned him. Claire, he said softly, maybe it's time— Don't you dare, she hissed. But he was already pulling out his phone. I'm sorry, he said, looking at me with something like relief in his eyes. I should have said something sooner. I was afraid. Afraid of what? David asked, his voice hollow. Tom turned his phone screen toward the table. These are messages Claire sent me over the past year. She made me promise not to show anyone, but I think you all need to see. I watched Claire's face crumble as her husband scrolled through message after message. Claire venting about me, planning her next move, discussing which concerns would be most effective in undermining David's trust. There were messages about fabricating the hotel story, messages about how to phrase things to sound helpful rather than manipulative, messages about previous girlfriends and how she'd successfully protected David from making terrible mistakes. I was protecting you, Claire said again, but her voice had lost its conviction. She was looking at David now, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand. After Dad died, it was just us. We took care of each other. We didn't need anyone else. And then you started bringing these women into our lives. Women who changed you, who pulled you away from me. From you? David repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Claire, I got married. I built a life. That's what people do. But why did you need to? Claire's voice rose, desperate now. We were fine the way we were. We had each other. I took care of you when Mom couldn't. I made sure you were okay. I was always there. You were my sister, David said. Not my wife. Not my keeper. My sister. I am your sister, Claire sobbed. That's why I did this. That's why I've always done this. Because I love you, and I know what's best for you. And these women, they don't love you like I do. They don't understand you. They'll hurt you, and I can't watch that happen again. The room fell silent except for Claire's crying. I looked at David and saw him truly seeing his sister for the first time. Not the protective older sibling who'd raised him after their father's death, but a woman whose love had curdled into possession, whose fear of abandonment had turned her into something cruel. Margaret spoke finally, her voice shaking. Claire, sweetheart, what have you done? Claire looked around the table wildly, searching for an ally, someone who would understand. I was just trying to help, she said. Why doesn't anyone see that? I was trying to protect him from making mistakes, from getting hurt. By destroying his relationships, James said, his voice heavy with disappointment. By lying to him about the women he loved? They weren't right for him. That wasn't your decision to make, I said quietly. Claire turned to me, and for the first time, I saw real hatred in her eyes. You don't deserve him, she spat. You swooped in with your perfect job and your perfect smile, and you took him away from me, from his family. He barely calls anymore. He barely visits. Everything changed when you came along. Because he grew up, I said. Because he built an adult life. That's not me stealing him. That's him becoming his own person. He was already his own person, Claire snapped. Until you convinced him he wasn't. Until you made him think he needed to choose between you and his family. No, David said, his voice cutting through Claire's tirade like a knife. Emma never made me choose. You did. Every time you called with a concern. Every time you pulled me aside at family dinners to warn me about something Emma supposedly did. Every time you made me feel like I had to defend my own wife to you. He stood up, his chair scraping back. I chose wrong, Claire. Every time I chose wrong. I chose you over her, and I'm ashamed of that. Claire stared at him, mouth open. David. I believed you, he continued, his voice cracking. When you said Emma was controlling. When you said she was isolating me from family. When you said you saw her with another man. I believed you because you're my sister, and I thought sisters don't lie about things like that. I wasn't lying, Claire insisted. I was interpreting what I saw. You were inventing what you wanted me to believe, David said. There's a difference. He turned to me and I saw tears in his eyes. "I'm so sorry," he said. "God, Emma, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. I should have listened when you tried to tell me what was happening. I chose the wrong person, and I nearly destroyed the best thing in my life because of it." I felt my own tears start then, hot and unstoppable. 18 months of being gaslit, of questioning my own reality, of feeling like I was going crazy. It all came pouring out in those tears. "I need some air," David said suddenly, heading for the door. "I can't. I need to think." He left. Claire started to follow him, but Tom caught her arm. "No," he said gently. "Let him go. You've done enough." Claire turned on him, fury replacing desperation. "How dare you take her side?" "I'm not taking sides," Tom said. "I'm acknowledging what you did, what we both know you've been doing for years." She wrenched her arm away from him, grabbed her purse, and stormed out. The front door slammed behind her, leaving the rest of us in heavy silence. Margaret wiped her eyes. "Emma, I don't know what to say. If I'd known—" "You did know," I said, not unkindly. "Maybe not the extent of it, but you knew something was wrong. You all did." James nodded slowly. "We told ourselves it was just sibling protectiveness, that Claire just cared a lot. We didn't want to see that she was hurting people," I finished. "That her version of love was actually control." The rest of the dinner was subdued. I helped Margaret clean up. She kept apologizing, tears streaming down her face as she washed dishes. Tom sat at the table with his head in his hands. James stared out the window into the dark backyard. When David came back an hour later, his eyes were red and his face was drawn. "Can we go home?" he asked me quietly. I nodded. We said quiet goodbyes and drove home in silence. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. David and I started couples therapy because the damage wasn't just from Claire. It was from 18 months of him not believing me, not trusting me, not choosing me. We had to rebuild trust from the ground up. Claire stopped calling. She stopped showing up at family events. According to Margaret, she refused to apologize, insisting that everyone was overreacting and that she'd been misunderstood. "She thinks she was helping," Margaret told me over coffee one afternoon, her face lined with exhaustion. "In her mind, everything she did was motivated by love. She can't seem to understand that love doesn't justify harm." "Does she miss him?" I asked. Margaret nodded sadly. "Desperately. But she won't admit she did anything wrong, so we're at an impasse." David was the one who struggled most. He'd built his entire identity around the idea that his sister was his protector, his champion. Learning that she'd been sabotaging his life for years broke something in him. He started therapy on his own, working through complicated feelings of betrayal and grief and guilt. "I keep thinking about all the relationships I lost," he told me one night, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling. Jenna, Mark, 2 other women before them. How many people did I hurt because I believed her lies? "You didn't know," I said. "I should have," he replied. The pattern was right there. Every girlfriend I got serious with, suddenly Claire had concerns. Suddenly they were flirting with other people or being controlling or something. And I believed her every time. What does that say about me? "It says you loved your sister and trusted her," I said. "That's not a character flaw, David. It's what she exploited." 3 months after that dinner, Claire reached out. Not to apologize, but to invite us to a family mediation session her therapist had suggested. David didn't want to go. "What's the point?" he said. "She's not going to change. She's not even sorry." "Maybe we go anyway," I suggested. "Not for her, for you. So you can say what you need to say." The mediation session was tense. Claire sat across from us in her therapist's office, arms crossed, defensive posture in every line of her body. Her therapist, a kind-faced woman named Dr. Morrison, guided the conversation carefully. "Claire, would you like to share why you asked your brother and sister-in-law to come today?" Dr. Morrison asked. Claire looked at her hands. "Because I miss my family. Because everyone's shut me out, and I don't think that's fair." "Do you understand why they've created distance?" Dr. Morrison asked gently. "Because Emma convinced them I'm some kind of monster," Claire said, eyes flashing up to meet mine. "Because one mistake got blown out of proportion." "One mistake?" David interrupted. "Claire, you systematically sabotaged my relationships for years. You lied about my wife. You manipulated me into doubting the person I love most. That's not one mistake." "I was looking out for you," Claire insisted. "Everything I did because I love you." "That's not love," David said, his voice breaking. "That's control. That's possession. That's you deciding what my life should look like and destroying anything that didn't fit your vision." Claire's face crumpled. "You don't understand. When Dad died, Mom fell apart. I had to step up. I had to take care of you. You were only 13, David. You needed me." "I did need you," David agreed. "When I was 13, when I was 15, 18, even 21. But I'm 34 years old now, Claire. I don't need a mother anymore. I need a sister. But you can't be that for me because you can't let go of the role you played when we were kids." The session didn't end
with resolution.
Claire left angry, insisting we were all punishing her unfairly. David left exhausted and sad. But something shifted in him after that. He stopped carrying guilt for setting boundaries. He stopped apologizing for choosing me over his sister's version of protection. 6 months after that terrible dinner, we found out I was pregnant. David cried when he saw the positive test, happy tears mixed with fear. "What if I mess this up?" he asked, holding me close. "What if I can't see when something's wrong? What if I trust the wrong people around our kid?" "You won't," I said, "because you're not the person you were a year ago. You've done the work. You've learned to trust yourself." We didn't tell Claire about the pregnancy right away. David wasn't ready, and I wasn't going to push. But eventually, Margaret found out and convinced David to at least inform Claire herself rather than let her hear it through the family grapevine. He called her. The conversation was brief and strained, but at the end she said, "Congratulations, I'm happy for you." Whether she meant it, we didn't know. 8 months after the confrontation, we hosted a small family dinner at our house, the first one since everything had imploded. Margaret and James came. Tom came, though he and Claire had separated after she refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing. And after much debate, we invited Claire. She arrived with flowers and a strained smile. "Thank you for including me," she said stiffly. "Ground rules," David said before she stepped inside. "No comments about Emma. No advice about our marriage or how we're living our lives. No helpful concerns. If you have something to say, you say it directly and honestly, not through implications or worried observations." Claire bristled but nodded. "Understood." Dinner was awkward. Claire was subdued, uncharacteristically quiet. She asked polite questions about the baby, complimented the food, made small talk with her parents. But the warmth that had once defined her presence was absent. She was a guest now, not family. After dinner, David followed her out to her car. Through the window, I watched them talk. Claire crying, David shaking his head, both of them saying things I couldn't hear. When he came back inside, I asked, "What did she say?" "That she's sorry," David replied, sinking onto the couch. "That she knows what she did was wrong. That she's been in therapy trying to understand why she couldn't let go." "Do you believe her?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I think she's sorry she lost me. I don't know if she's sorry she did what she did. There's a difference." I sat down beside him, taking his hand. "You don't have to fix this with her, you know. You don't have to let her back in just because she's family." "I know," he said. "But I also don't want to punish her forever. I don't know how to trust her again." "Maybe you don't," I said gently. "Maybe the relationship you have with her moving forward looks different than it did before. More boundaries, more distance, more honesty." He leaned his head on my shoulder. "When did you get so wise?" "When I had to fight for a year and a half to be believed in my own marriage," I said without bitterness. "Trauma is a hell of a teacher." We sat there in silence, his hand on my growing belly, the weight of the past year settling around us like snow. The baby came in April, a daughter we named Lily. Claire sent a gift but didn't visit the hospital. She waited until we invited her, 3 weeks later, to meet her niece. She held Lily with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. "She's beautiful," she whispered. "She is," I agreed, watching her carefully for any sign of the possessiveness that had defined her before. But all I saw was grief, for what she'd lost, for the relationships she'd destroyed, for the trust that might never be fully repaired. As she handed Lily back to me, Claire said something I never expected. "I hope she never knows what I did. I hope you can give her a family that's healthier than the one I helped create." "We're trying," I said honestly. She nodded and left shortly after. Now, 2 years later, Claire exists on the periphery of our lives. She comes to birthday parties and holidays, always polite, always careful. She doesn't offer advice. She doesn't pull David aside for concerned conversations. She asks before visiting, respects boundaries, and leaves when she's supposed to. Is it forgiveness? I'm not sure. It's more like acknowledgement, an understanding that the relationship we have now is the result of what she did then, and that rebuilding takes time, if it happens at all. David still grieves the sister he thought he had, the one who protected him without also controlling him, the one who loved him without needing to own him. He's learning to accept that maybe she never existed, and that's its own kind of loss. As for me, I learned something important, that being believed matters more than being liked, that standing up for yourself isn't the same as causing a scene, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be quiet about the truth, even when the truth is ugly. Families aren't perfect. They're collections of imperfect people trying to love each other despite their flaws and wounds and fears. Sometimes that love heals. Sometimes it hurts. The difference, I've learned, is whether people are willing to acknowledge the hurt and do the work to change. Claire is trying. It's messy and incomplete and years too late. But she's trying. And for now, that's all we can ask.